Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I'm talking with Evenica's Kelly Mazur about the unique commerce-related challenges in the public sector and why municipalities and other local government entities are looking to use Dynamics 365 Commerce as an important part of their interaction with citizens and outside organizations. Evenica is the sponsor of this episode, and Kelly and I discussed some of the key points raised during Evenica's recent panel discussion on MSDW, covering topics like the evolution of D365 Commerce and the broader role of Microsoft's finance and operations solutions in government and public sector. We talk about some of the strongest use cases that the Evenica team has seen for commerce in public sector, the importance of web portals and technology that can ease the RFP process, and Kelly shares some perspective on both the parallels and the unique needs that public service organizations have compared to industries like finance, law, and healthcare. All right. Well, Kelly Mazur, welcome to the podcast today. Thanks for coming back. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I wanted to use this chance to discuss some of the commerce in public sector themes that I know Evenica has been thinking about recently. We were discussing recently on a webcast as well. But maybe we should start with some intros. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
For sure. My name's Kelly Mazur, and I own marketing and Microsoft partnership at Evenica. Evenica is a Microsoft partner that is focused solely on D365 Commerce. So we are the leading implementer of D365 Commerce, and then we have a growing portfolio of our own IP that extends and amplifies the capabilities of commerce. So in my role, I work very closely with the business development team, and we work on creating industry-specific commerce solutions, such as commerce for public sector, which we'll be exploring today.
All right, excellent. And yeah, I mean, from my perspective, commerce in the D365 space is a super interesting topic, one that's really evolved in recent years from a heritage of many years ago, kind of in the retail space, into a true commerce offering. What's your perspective, or can you explain a little more of a history of Evenica's experience in the last few years developing your outlook on commerce in the public sector?
For sure. I mean, we've always had really strong roots in the retail industry, but in the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic, manufacturing has actually become our largest industry that we're working in. We've got customers in healthcare and automotive. We've got sales plays in financial services. And of course, public sector is something that is coming up a lot. And this week alone, we've been working on 3 demos this week for public sector.
Okay, very interesting. What are some of the unique characteristics or challenges of public sector and local government? Why are municipalities looking to use commerce?
I mean, the biggest challenge that we see is these siloed legacy systems. So if you picture whatever municipality you may live in, you likely have a different login to pay your taxes, to pay a parking ticket, to get a license for your dog, or to sign your kid up for swimming lessons. And for the citizen, it's not a great experience to have multiple sign-ins, not just the separate accounts and the separate passwords, but also the separate URLs and websites that you have to navigate and save. And then for the municipality, there's some issues on that end too, because they're lacking a single source of truth. They don't have that one holistic view of the citizen. So with public sector and the public services budgeted, targeted towards the well-being of citizens, it does create a bit of a bottleneck there in how those citizens are being serviced. So we're looking to create a unified citizen experience using commerce.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, I can imagine most people who interact with their local governments, local or city or even state, they have those experiences and they sort of know where it works well and where it doesn't. And it becomes almost a very personal, or something that I think everyone can relate to, both at a personal level and thinking about sort of what would, if you are a government employee, sort of what would make your operations smoother, maybe more efficient, probably more cost effective. Yeah, it's an interesting case, an interesting sort of industry, I guess, if you will, where commerce really does play a big part on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. So when we use commerce as that platform, similar to how in headquarters you would have categories for all different products. Instead of products, those are all different services or things that can be purchased, such as those licenses or permits and whatnot. So you have this unified front end in a single sign-on experience. And then in the back end, we've got these different categories of these different divisions that could be in public sector or in a municipality. And of course, because we're using commerce as the platform, those transaction capabilities are built in right there. And, we're leveraging other areas of D365 to have that individual portfolio of each citizen, similar to how you would for a customer.
Yeah, and you touched on this. I think this is a super interesting detail, the idea that you can, as commerce-based scenarios arise in government work, I mean, whether it's bringing more departments into the fold or just, different needs that come up, you can use a single platform to fulfill different needs that do involve a transaction.
Absolutely. So you can think of it as a portal, except for it's got those built-in transaction capabilities. And it also allows you to spin up what we would refer to as a digital pop-up shop. So you could look at something like a city-run event, maybe it's your annual Rib Fest, which we have in my city. You could have a digital pop-up site that is selling tickets to that. It could be selling merch to that. You could be selling food and beverage passes online ahead of the event and just having all of that capabilities to handle that within that original investment that you made in D365 Commerce.
What about when it comes to like budget prioritization? Does that factor into the need for a unified commerce solution?
For sure, yeah. And we've seen a lot that are leveraging F&O as a whole and are looking to create that ecosystem of Dynamics and Power Platform and really making sure that the investment that has been made in all of these different systems, it's all connected, right? And it's all a unified solution.
Yeah. And I think it's at least good to just mention, I mean, F&O itself has really a long legacy in government. There have been solutions for years and they've really evolved. I think on the recent webcast, we even touched on some of the really key capabilities that continue to come out to really, I guess, support the needs of government deployments, right, of F&O that really are unique from other industries like you were talking about, but certainly no less complex and no less demanding.
Yeah. And we might have touched on it briefly in the webcast, but it definitely wasn't something we focused on during that. But the security side of things, I think it positions Microsoft as a really unique contender for this because of the advanced security and trust center is something that, our competitors may be lacking in there, which is obviously quite important for government and public sector.
So we've talked about portals for municipalities already a bit, but can you tell us any more about why commerce should be used to create portals?
So what we love about creating a portal using commerce as a platform is that you've got that single sign-on for the citizen. So they can log in, they can make any purchases they need, whether it is licenses or permits or signing up for those swim lessons. And then on the back end, the municipality is having that single view of the customer. One thing that Evenica is doing with commerce as a portal for municipalities is utilizing some of our own IP around eligibility and requirements, which is something that we often use with beverage and cannabis sales. And so what we've done here is when you have this eligibility feature enabled, you can think of it as a citizen logging in or a local business logging in. So we're doing that checkpoint to see which one you are. And then we've got a different availability of services or permits based on whether you are a citizen or a local business. And I think that is not only a great experience on the front end, but on the back end as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I can just imagine just thinking of my own sort of local government, the discussions and sort of debate around various elements of rules and the nuances of what they end up agreeing to in different sort of, approval scenarios or whatever. I can see how every scenario is going to be a little different and the rules are going to be slightly unique and really require something like that.
Absolutely. And I think if we're brainstorming future state here, this is a great area to start leveraging AI too when it comes to that eligibility and approval process of, maybe the beginning stages of applying for a business permit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's probably a lot of those types of rules that an AI-based system can learn from and probably apply on its own then.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the RFP process. It's something that came up in the webcast, and you and the other guests had some really interesting things to say about the ways that both Evenica and even Microsoft try to, I would say, ease some of the pain points and inefficiencies that typically are seen in an RFP. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the points that you thought were really valuable from that conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So RFP processes, they can be extremely intimidating. It can be a huge workload. I do think at Evenica, we've really streamlined that process. And we have employees now that actually quite enjoy responding to RFPs. And, we've got a really good process in place there. So it does usually start with Microsoft. We are usually working with a Microsoft seller there to kind of facilitate that relationship. And I think what's worked very well for Evenica is that we are always looping in another partner. So we'll use another partner. Ellipse was on the webcast with them. We've done a lot of work with them. And we love that they also have experience with public sector. So that makes it a really smooth working relationship. And what we focus on is bringing in the commerce expertise. So we utilize these P2P relationships and we know exactly where our boundaries are of what we need and what those dependencies are working with an F&O partner. And we find that when we tackle it together and maybe bringing in some additional capabilities or other vendors as well, it's really that better together story. And when we approach it together, we seem to have really great results that way.
Yeah, interesting. I think one of the things I took away from the conversation was that a partner essentially shouldn't be sort of bearing all the burden of trying to get through an RFP, which can be quite lengthy and labor intensive to deal with, right? They shouldn't be doing it on their own.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to just get a little more perspective from you on is the sort of the broader landscape and where you see public sector really sort of fitting in with other industries that you've already talked about. Can you give any other perspective on sort of how you look at public sector in the context of the other areas where Evenica works?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen a lot of similarities in our approach to public sector as we have in financial services. So financial services, we're often looking at using commerce as a portal as well. And it's really more of a self-service angle, but there is some overlap there. So in financial services, you could have a customer who is able to log into this self-serve portal. They can view documents, they can download invoices, they can make payment online. Let's say we're getting into professional services and maybe it's a law office. You could prepay for a block of hours ahead of time. So it's giving you all of that self-service capabilities and that visibility that the customer is looking for, but it's also layering in the ability to transact. And that is the major difference between spinning up any different type of portal versus using commerce as that portal, is that built-in transaction capability and the connection to other areas of dynamics.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think the law firm example is a great one because it draws some parallels. I would say medical offices too. It draws parallels to public sector where, think of the places where I, again, personally, the only reason I keep a checkbook around anymore is for some of those very industries where they haven't caught up yet.
Yeah. And in medical, we're doing something similar too, where it is a platform where a patient can access their medical information, treatment plans, instructions, stuff like that, but then also make the purchase of medication or supplements as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, we've really, just thinking back now to the start of this conversation, we've touched on quite a few of those industries, right? Now, you mentioned financial services, cannabis, and did you mention food? There was another one that you mentioned as well.
No, we do a lot of beverage.
Okay. Yep. And I think you even touched on manufacturing near the beginning. So, there's certainly unique elements to what local government and municipalities need in these scenarios. But I mean, it certainly sounds like, from your experience and what Evenica is actually working on, the technology and the application of it certainly is well aligned.
Yeah. And at Evenica, we like to say that commerce exists where transaction meets interaction. And that's kind of become our tagline. So it's merging the ERP with the CRM, and commerce sits really nicely right in the middle.
Yeah, for sure.
And it doesn't really matter what industry, we're applying it to, the principles stay the same.
Excellent. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for being here. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, if you are looking for a public sector solution that involves transactions and interactions and bringing that together, then we at Evenica would love to chat with you. As I mentioned, we work with customers in retail, manufacturing, healthcare, and of course, public sector as well, among many others. We are very, very P2P friendly. I would say majority of the projects we do are with another partner, and we really work well with other partners in those situations. And at Evenica, we've been ideating commerce for municipalities and the citizen experience over the past 3 years. And we're really happy to see that thinking is now aligning with the current mindset of public sector. And we do see this being a growing demand that started years back, but now with the adoption of it, it's really starting to heat up. And we're just really excited to be having these conversations with different municipalities and really, pushing the boundaries of what we can do with additional IP as well to enhance that experience.
All right, excellent. Yeah, these are great stories. I look forward to learning about more of them as we move forward. And it was a great webcast as well. We'll be putting links to that and other references and resources in the show notes here. So Kelly, thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of the MSTW podcast. My thanks once again to Kelly Mazur for joining me. You can find a link to the webcast we mentioned on this episode in the show notes. And this message from Evenica. Over the past 20 years, Evenica has defined commerce as a category and become one of the leading implementers of Dynamics 365 Commerce. They work with Microsoft customers across each major industry to create synergy between transactions and interactions. You can learn more about them at evenica.com. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.